Bearskin from 50 Famous Fairy Tales. There was once a soldier who fought well and bravely, but when peace came and he received his discharge, he knew not where to go. His parents were dead, and he had no home of his own, so he asked his brothers to take him in until he might find some work to do. But his brothers had hard hearts and answered they could do nothing for him. The poor fellow had nothing in the world but his gun, so he shouldered it and went into the world. He had not gone far when he came to a meadow in the middle of which stood a circle of trees. He sat down in the shade and thought gloomily of his fate. I have no money, no trade but war, and I am not fit for anything. I fear I shall die of hunger. Just then he heard a noise, and lifting his eyes, he saw before him a stranger, handsomely dressed in green, but with a hideous cloven hoof. I know what you want, said the stranger. It is money. You shall have as much as you can carry, but first I want you to convince myself that you are not afraid, for I give nothing to cowards. Soldiers and cowards, said the young man, are two words that do not go together. You may put me to the test. Well, then, replied the stranger, look behind you. The soldier, turning around, saw a huge bear coming toward him, growling fiercely. Oh, he said, I'll tickle your nose and cure you of your growling. He leveled his musket and shot the bear dead on the spot. I see, said the stranger, that you do not lack courage, but there are other conditions that you will need to fulfill. Nothing shall stop me, said the soldier, who saw he had to do something with this evil spirit, so long as my soul is not in danger. You shall judge that for yourself, replied the spirit. For 7 years you are not to wash yourself, nor comb your hair, nor cut your nails. I will give you a coat and a cloak, which you must wear during this whole time. If you die in the meantime, you will belong to me. But if you live longer than 7 years, you shall be free and rich for your whole life. The soldier thought of poverty to which he must be reduced, and as he had so often defied death, he decided to face it once more and accepted the proposal. The evil spirit took off his own coat and gave it to the soldier, saying, so long as you wear this coat, wherever you put your hand into the pocket, it will bring out a handful of money. Then, having stripped the bear of its skin, he added, this will serve as your cloak and your bed as well, for you may have no other. Because of this clothing, you will be called Bearskin. Then the spirit vanished. The soldier put on the coat, and thrusting his hand into the pocket, he found the stranger had not deceived him. He put the bearskin on his back and began to roam through the world, denying himself none of the good things which make people fat and their purses lean. The first year his appearance was passable enough, but the second he looked frightful. His hair had become completely covered his face, his beard had matted like a piece of felt, and his face felt so entirely covered with dirt that if grass seed were sown into it, he would have had a fine lawn. Everyone fled before him in terror. He gave to all the poor, begging them to pray that he might not die within 7 years. During the fourth year, he came to an inn where the owner refused to have him even in the stable for fear it would frighten the horses. But Bearskin drew out a handful of gold from his pocket, and the innkeeper changed his mind at the sight of it and gave him a room at the back of the house on condition he would not let himself be seen and thus destroy the reputation of the establishment. One evening, Bearskin was sitting in his room, wishing with all his heart that the 7 years were over, when he heard someone sobbing in the next chamber. Being a good-hearted fellow, he opened the door and saw an old man with his head resting in his hands, shaking with sobs. When the old man saw Bearskin come in, he leaped up in fright and started to run away, but he grew calmer when he heard himself addressed by a human voice. At last, by means of friendly words, Bearskin succeeded in persuading the old man to tell him the cause of his sorrow. The old man said he had lost all his fortune and that his daughters were reduced to such poverty that he could not pay his bill and he was going to be sent to prison. If this is your only cause of grief, Bearskin, I have enough money for you. And he summoned the innkeeper, paid him, and gave the old man a large sum besides. The old man did not know how to express his gratitude. Come with me, he said. My daughters are all beautiful, and you shall choose one for your wife, and she will not refuse when she hears what you have done for me. Bearskin agreed to accompany the old man, but when the eldest daughter caught sight of the horrible-looking fellow, she fled away with loud cries, and the second stood her ground and looked over the suitor from head to foot. Then she flounced out, saying, how am I to accept a husband who does not have a human face? I'd rather have the dancing bear I saw at the fair last week. But the youngest daughter said, dear father, he must be a good man because he helped us. You have promised him a wife, and you must keep your word. Unfortunately, Bearskin was face was covered with hair and dirt, and the daughter would have seen the flush of joy that spread across his cheeks as he heard these words. He took a ring from his finger and broke it in two and gave one half to his betrothed bride. He begged her to keep it carefully, while he kept the other half. On the piece he gave her, he wrote his own name, and on his piece he wrote her name. Then he left her, saying, I must leave you for 3 years. If I come back, we will be married, but if I do not come back, you will know I am dead, and you will be free. Pray that my life be spared. The poor betrothed maiden was sad, and the tears came into her eyes when she thought of her future husband. As for the man with the bearskin, he wandered through the world doing good whenever he was able and giving generously to the poor. At last, when the last day of the 7 years had come, he returned to the meadow and entered the circle of trees. The wind sprang up, and the angry spirit appeared. He threw the soldier his old clothes and asked him to have his green coat back again. Wait a minute, said Bearskin. First you must wash me, comb my hair, and cut my nails. The evil spirit was obliged, very much against his will, to do as Bearskin commanded. The soldier now looked handsomer than he had before in the 7 years. Bearskin felt a great weight taken from his heart when the evil spirit departed without further tormenting him. He returned to town and put on a magnificent velvet coat, and stepping into the carriage drawn by 4 white horses, drove to the house of his bride. No one recognized him. The girl father took him for an officer of high rank and invited him to the room where his daughters sat. They put a delicious feast before him and declared they had never seen such a handsome cavalier. But as his betrothed, she sat opposite him in her black dress, with her eyes cast down, and said not a word. At length the father asked him if he would marry one of his daughters. The 2 eldest girls ran into their room to bedeck themselves in jewels and fine clothes, for each thought she would be the chosen one. The stranger, left alone with his betrothed, took his half of the ring from his pocket and dropped it into a glass of wine which he offered her. When she had drunk the wine and seen the ring at the bottom glass, she felt her heart beat quickly. She seized the other half, which hung from her neck, and fitted the piece together. Then he said to her, I am your bridegroom, whom you saw under the bearskin. By now, heaven's mercy, I have restored to my own shape. He took her in his arms and kissed her again and again. At that moment, the 2 sisters came back, dressed in their finest clothes. When they saw that the handsome young man was for their sister, and that he was the man who had worn the bearskin, they stamped their feet in a pout and ran off. But the soldier and the youngest daughter were married without delay, and they lived happily for many, many years.